Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to support the very important work that NISA is doing, especially serving the most vulnerable in our community. And for many, many years now, I've had quite a few friends who've been tirelessly working in the shadows, out of the spotlight, helping support the work that NISA does. And it's an honor and it's a privilege to be here tonight, being a part of that. And over the years, I've spoken to more than a few domestic violence victims. And we've gotten into some discussions about, kind of questioning how was it that we got here? My friends who were talking to me about some of the difficult situations they found themselves in with abusive husbands. And there's been a whole range of theories about how they got to where they were. Sometimes they talked about substance abuse issues, sometimes they talked about mental health issues like personality disorders, but many times they talked about how their ex-husbands grew up, what the environment was like in their homes, and what kind of often dysfunctional marriages they witnessed amongst their own parents, and what kind of abusive parenting they often experienced. So it makes sense why NISA, every single year at their annual fundraiser, chooses to have somebody give a talk around the theme of family, around the theme of healthy marriages, healthy communities, healthy families. And so I was asked to come speak tonight on an article that I wrote back in 2010 called Raising Children with Deen and Dunya. Deen means religion, and Dunya is just shorthand for the worldly life, the secular life. And I want to just from the get-go make it clear that I'm not an expert, I'm not a family therapist, I'm not a scholar, I'm just a data collector and a storyteller. And this article was written after I had been really sitting down families who I found were very, very successful in how they had raised their kids and how their kids had grown up to be healthy adults, kind, compassionate, caring human beings, and unapologetic Muslims. And I asked them, what is it that you did? How did you raise your kids to be the way they are? And I noticed over time, they gave me a whole spectrum of advice. But there were 10 themes, 10 nuggets of wisdom that kept popping up from time to time. So I compiled those 10 tips and wrote an article, and now I've created a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm going to be presenting to you tonight. Usually this PowerPoint presentation takes around an hour and a half to 2 hours to cover, but today I'm going to be giving the Cliff's Notes version, speeding through it, trying to get done in half an hour, inshallah. All right, so without further ado. So the tips, the 10 tips, they are listed in order of how common they were mentioned, how often they were brought up. And the number one tip all 100% of these families gave me and said that you need this in order to have successful families is dua, 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 which gets translated to supplication, turning to Allah, turning to our Lord and Creator. And these families were very, very hesitant to take any kind of credit for the successes that we were witnessing. They said, this doesn't come from us, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we prayed for this, and it's completely His mercy, and we have nothing to do with what you're seeing. Now, it's really easy when you hear that to say, okay, fine, pray about it, I get it, but tell me really, what should I be doing? If that's our reaction, honestly, we have to pause, and we have to reflect, and we have to realize that that's a false premise to begin with, to think that there's anything really besides prayer that gives us our success. So these families told me that anytime they had a difficult decision they had to make in their children's lives, they would turn to Salatul Istikhara, the prayer of guidance. Anytime there was something they felt they really needed in their kids' lives, they would turn to Salatul Haja, the prayer of need. Anytime they saw a blessing appear in their children's lives, they would be very quick to pray the Salatul Shukr, prayer of gratitude. They prayed for their children when their kids started working, even if it was something as simple as a babysitting job. They prayed for their children to always have halal incomes, permissible incomes. From a young age, they prayed for their children to grow up to have pious spouses. And they always prayed for their children to have husnul khatima, a beautiful ending where they leave this world with the shahada, the testimony of faith, not only on their lips, but in their hearts as well. All right, the second tip. Your suhbah, meaning your companionship, will make you or break you. So the commonsensical advice is that you have to keep a close eye on who your kids' friends are. We all know that. But what I've realized over time is that it's not enough to just look at who your kids' friends are. We also have to be reflecting about who our friends are. Who's our circle? What kind of village are we raising our children up in? And it definitely takes a village to raise kids, especially in this day and age. And so if you find families where the husbands get along and the wives get along and the children get along and everybody is like-minded and has similar values, those are families that you want to grab. They're diamonds. And it's not necessary to have 100 friends or to be, the belle of the ball, the social butterfly, having tons of parties every weekend. Really, you only need 2 or 3 good, solid friends. And when it comes to suhbah, I also noticed that a lot of these successful families had grandparents living in the home. Over and over, these exceptional young people, I found out they had a grandmother or a grandfather who was in the home, and it makes sense because in this day and age of where it's all about me, having to worry about somebody else's needs and having to show respect to elders gets taught by having to do it day in and day out. There's also the importance of mentorship, to not just rely on your kids being friends with people who are only their ages. It's important to find the yunkles, I like to call yunkles, young uncles, and the bajis, the older sisters in the community, who can be a good influence and who have a passion for the religion, but who are also succeeding in their studies and their careers and can be good role models for your kids. So it's important to bring them in your circles as well. And it takes time to invest in friendship. It takes time for people to feel that they trust you and they're willing to be vulnerable around you. So look out for good friends. Okay, so who could possibly be the best companion for our kids? And that brings me to the third tip. These parents told me the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a living, breathing reality in our lives. He was not somebody from the ancients. He was not somebody from the history books or only relegated to Sunday school lessons. He was somebody relevant and he was somebody real. The way you may talk about a grandfather whom your children never met, who may have passed away before your kids were born, but your kids grow up hearing every detail about the grandfather and they grow up loving him and respecting him and hoping to meet him one day. That's the kind of relationship these kids had with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When our children were back in preschool, we asked Imam Zayd Shakir, what should we be teaching them? And Imam Zayd said, teach them Sira, the biography of the Prophet ﷺ, and nasheeds, songs written in praise of him. I know of a 2-year-old right now whose parents do not play nursery rhymes for him. They only play nasheeds. And I've witnessed this myself where he will get in the car, 2-year-old, and he'll tell his parents, Mama, put on Allahumma salli ala. And it's really beautiful to hear that. Right now it's just on his lips, but inshallah eventually the salawat will penetrate his heart, and that's what he's growing up with. I have a nephew named Mustafa who's 15 years old now, mashallah. But back when he was 7 years old, I was visiting my sister, and I saw a yellow book, which is available on Amazon even now, if you want to order it for yourselves. It was called Shama'il, S-H-A-M-A-I-L, Shama'il, which means characteristics. It's written by Imam Tirmidhi back in the 9th century. And I saw that sitting next to his bed, and I asked my sister, what's up with this book? Tell me about it. And she told me, oh, Shama'il is just a collection of hadiths, a collection of characteristics about the Prophet ﷺ. And every night, before Mustafa goes to bed, his father reads him one hadith, just one, about some detail of the Prophet ﷺ. And she said that for Mustafa to know something like the fact that the Prophet ﷺ liked to eat dates and cucumbers together made him feel like he actually knew him. So you can't really love somebody until you know him. So that's important to keep that in mind, that the Prophet ﷺ should be somebody who's mentioned often. Okay, fourth tip.